This is Brian. I'm ready to go.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Brian. I would now like to call the Woodlands Water Agency Board of Trustees meeting for March to order. And I would like to ask Brian if you could go through and give us an explanation of the teleconference and our meeting procedures.
Yes, sir. This is Brian Yates with Schwartz Page. Welcome everybody to the Woodlands Water Board of Trustees meeting for Wednesday, March the 10th, 2021. As always, we appreciate everyone being able to participate this evening remotely due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. As in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through the meeting procedures and then we'll perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we'll continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely this evening so that we can accurately reflect the attendance and the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for trustees, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. So starting with our Board of Trustees, Eric Hurd.
Present.
Ron Wilson.
Present.
Kyle Mays.
Here. Repeatedly. Only had about
Paul Martin.
Present.
James.
Hartley McIntosh.
Present.
For healthcare.
Ron Cucci.
Present.
Jan Price.
Present.
Scott Custer.
Present.
Laura Norton.
Here.
Bob Lux.
Present.
Okay, that completes the roll call for our trustees. We'll move on to Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Present.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Present.
Jeannie Scott.
Present.
Any other members of Woodlands Water staff in the meeting? If not, we'll move on to San Jacinto River Authority staff. Ron Kelly.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Matt Corley.
Present.
Any other members of the River Authority in the meeting?
Brian, this is Aaron Schindewolf.
Brian, this is Heather Ramsey Cook.
This is Matt Volna.
This is Randy Peterson.
This is Suha Jarudi.
Okay, this is Brian. Do we have any other River Authority staff in the meeting? If not, we'll move on to Woodlands Water Consultants. Do we have any Woodlands Water Consultants in the meeting? If not, we'll move on to members of the public. Would each member of the public please identify themselves one at a time? And as usual, if you have a unique spelling for your name, please go ahead and spell that out so we'll get that correct for the minutes. So I'll go ahead and just open it up for each person to identify themselves.
This is Paul Brown.
Arthur Bredoff.
Oh, and one more, I'm sorry, one other thing. If you could also mention which, if you live in the Woodlands, because of course we could have members of the public that do not live in the Woodlands, but if we do, if you are a resident of one of the MUDs and you know which MUD you live in, if you would mention that as well.
Arthur Bredoff, sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Woodlands. And I'm on MUD 47's board.
Arthur Bredoff, I live in the Woodlands and I live in the MUD 47 district.
John Yours, MUD 36.
Betty Doherty, MUD 60.
Neil Gaynor, MUD 6.
Penny
Mark
Unland,
Mud 47.
Aaron Hofstetter, Mud 6.
Lance McLeod, Kimley Horn, last name spelled McLeod.
Gary Miller, I'm a Woodlands resident. I'm in Mud 60.
Mario Chapa, LAN Consulting Engineers.
Stephanie Zertucha, Mud 7.
Any other members of the public that have not been identified?
David Munn with Friesa Nichols.
You may have missed me. I'm Penny Bradshaw. I'm a resident and I am in Mud 7.
Anyone else? This is Brian Maureen. Did that cover all the folks that are in the meeting?
The only one I didn't catch was Mark Unland and someone named David that just joined.
That was David Munn with Friesa Nichols.
Oh, sorry about that.
And Mark Unland, Mud 47.
Okay, I believe that will conclude the roll call. Eric, I'll go ahead and hand it back over to you to begin the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Brian, for taking us through that. And thank you, everybody in attendance at the meeting, for your patience in going through the procedures. Just, allows us to have a meeting. So we'll go ahead and hit item number 2 on the agenda, our opening invocation. And I'd like to say an invocation at this time. Dear Lord, we come to you tonight, and we thank you for the opportunity to serve our community. We thank you for this beautiful place that we live and this wonderful time that we live in. We ask that you grant us wisdom and discernment and power through your Holy Spirit, and help us to listen to one another and make good decisions for our community. We ask your continued blessing on our families, our children, our community, and our nation. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so we've got a lot to cover tonight. So if you could keep our discussions, we want to have open discussion. We want to hear what everyone has to say, but if you could try to speak succinctly, it'll help things keep moving, okay? But please speak up if you would like to say something. So now we'll move on to item 3 on the agenda, receive comments from the public.
This is Paul Brown.
Yes, Paul.
If you want, I'll start off. Yeah, if you recall, in January, I attended a meeting and I talked about, the fact that this community is just about 50 years old. And I believe that it's critical to take action in the current interest rate environment as it relates to the opportunities to finance infrastructure replacement and updating. And I had occasion in the current packet to get San Jacinto's project plan executive summary, which is planned to summarize, I guess, 2022 to 2031 projects. Okay. And I just had a couple of comments, questions on that. The first thing is, I've read through all of this. I actually did meet with San Jacinto in February, on February 3rd, I think, to discuss a lot of this. And I think it's a good start. I think for our organization, meaning the MUDs as well as the Service Bureau, this needs to be a new process in a mature environment outside of our normal planning and accounting process, okay? With committed funding over time, okay? Perhaps not budgeted funding necessarily, because I don't know whether we can actually budget across timelines, but a thorough understanding of what we're committing to in terms of, making sure that we don't run into the kinds of problems that a few weeks ago, the city of Houston and other places ran into, and find ourselves with sewerage problems, or, having to boil water, or not even getting any water in certain instances. So I think it really needs to be a rolling plan, a process inside of the organization's planning process, an annual review and proposal. The second thing is, the whole issue of funding. There's no mention in this summary that San Jacinto put together, which is fine, of how we're going to fund this expenditure or these expenditures over 10 years, and what the thinking is of all of the interested parties on the various boards, as well as on the Woodlands Water and San Jacinto. And so how are we going to do that, and by whom? Right now, we have an unusual situation in the markets. Okay, I'm one of those people who's been up and down in the markets over my life and career. I was a lender in New York City, starting in the 70s, and I actually was still a lender when the prime rate went to 21. And we were lending at, or trying to lend at 3 points over prime. So the marketplace can move quickly, but we have a tremendous opportunity at very low interest rates right now to fund these kinds of updates, okay? And I think that one of the things we definitely need to look at is the planning process, the projection process of the 2 to 3 or more opportunities for financing that might exist. I don't even know if, because I haven't seen the bill, but I don't know, and maybe Ron would know ultimately, and others, whether there's money out there in the current COVID plan that was just passed that we could make use of as a low funding source. But we need to really, I think, plan our way through that.
About 3 minutes, so if you could start wrapping up.
Yeah, I've only got a couple more. The other observation I have is we've got listed, according to my conversations with Ron, we've got $1 billion above and below ground in terms of infrastructure assets, okay? And I guess what I wonder about is, why are we talking about $189 million over 10 years, which is only roughly 20% of those assets, okay? It seemed to me a better target would be somewhere in the area of 500 million over 10 years. You'll also notice as you look at the presentation that it's backloaded. So most of the work is being done in the latter part of the series of projects. The other thing that's absent, which isn't Ron's issue so much as a group issue, is what's the price to our customers in rate yearly over the initial 10 years of this series of events? How is it going to affect our customers and the price of their water and perhaps sewer? And then finally, what's the plan to socialize a program like this to all mud directors in the muds here in the Woodlands? And thank you for your time.
Okay, Paul, you had some good comments there, and there's a lot to chew on there. Okay, any other comments from the public?
This is Mark Unland. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. The consolidation of the wastewater treatment plants is included in this agenda, and I don't know if y'all are planning to take any action on that or just discuss it. But I ask you not to proceed with this project until a proper opportunity evaluation is done. What's being proposed right now is not an opportunity evaluation. It's just the first step in developing the billion-dollar project. For example, in SJRA's previous timeline presented a couple of months ago, resident engagement doesn't even start until you've spent over $2 million and are 2 years into the project. That's not the way to evaluate an opportunity which will have an impact on affected and adjacent residents. So I ask you to do three things before starting the major project. First, you should engage with the local leaders and impacted residents to share your plan and incorporate their feedback and their concerns into the evaluation. Don't do your plan, your evaluation, and then try to get resident feedback. Build their concerns into your evaluation. Second, develop a plan to evaluate the opportunity in an unbiased manner, looking at a variety of options and qualitatively evaluating them at a screening level. This isn't spending $500,000. This is spending a few $1,000s and evaluate it on a screening level. As a minimum, the option should include consolidating at 2. It should also include consolidating at 1 as an option. And it should include consolidating at another designated location or locations. The plan should include active oversight by representatives of those affected groups and explain how you will address the feedback and the concerns of the local leaders in the evaluation. And then third, present the results of this opportunity evaluation in public meetings to gather feedback before you select your short list for final study. That will ensure, by having the active oversight, you'll ensure that you're having an unbiased evaluation. By following these steps, you're actively engaging the people that are most effective, and you're building quality into the project from the beginning. Don't make the mistake of skipping the opportunity evaluation phase and having to do it right the second time. Thanks.
That was a very valuable comment. Who was that, Mark?
Mark Unland.
Thank you, Mark. That was very well organized. Thank you. Any other comments?
Yes, so this is Gary Miller. I'm a Woodlands resident. I live in Mud 60. I have appeared a couple times recently. What happened is a 75-foot monopole was built kind of directly behind my house. I've been talking with Mr. Stinson. He actually came out to my house and saw the pole, and I took him through my backyard and showed him everything. I believe tonight it might be agenda item number 15, are the different costs and different things related to the pole. Apparently this happened, and I mean, no notice was ever given to any of the residents, and this kind of pole just showed up behind our house one day. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm trying to request that this pole be relocated somewhere else. I don't know if no one thought we were going to notice or it wasn't a big deal, but I mean, it's right behind my house and you can see it off my roof when you're driving towards my house. And no one really asked us anything. The costs are included in the agenda, it appears to me. I believe that my impression from Mr. Simpson was that these plans were going to be presented to me before it was presented to you. That didn't happen. And then also, I mean, I keep talking about it. I don't understand why no one ever told us this was happening. Anyway, I'm urging this board to vote to relocate it. I mean, it's not my fault that I have to come on here every month and complain about this thing in my backyard, and it's going to cost a bunch of money, and now you guys are going to say you don't want to move it, because that has nothing to do with us, and we were never even given a chance to even discuss it. Thank you.
Well, Gary, thank you for your comments. I know that Jim and staff have been actively working to take a look at the situation in the pole behind your house, and I'm sure there will be more discussions, and hopefully we can get to a resolution that you're happy with. But thank you for coming. We appreciate you being here. All right, any more comments?
Mr. President, Arthur Bredehoff, sir.
Hi, Arthur. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight before the public in this meeting. I first like to start off and thank all the people and organizations that have lobbied GMA 14, the Lone Star Groundwater District directors and their executive director, to approve a reasonable low DFC that will positively impact our aquifers and subsidence levels. The work has been stellar. I'd like to call this option A. I'd like to secondary talk about an option B. I think it's important to have an option B that can impact the aquifers and subsidence. And I know everyone on this call and all our residents are talking about aquifer levels and subsidence and really want to take steps to impact that in a positive way, not only for our current generation, but for our future generations. And I think the groundwater and surface water levels is what I call as option B. And as the trustees know, Woodlands Water has had a subcommittee on groundwater and surface water that reported out on the 13th of May, 2020, and recommended to the trustees during the budgetary process to look at moving towards a 50-50 ratio when possible. And a higher, it's been clearly demonstrated by SJRA's static well report from 2010 to 2020 that was presented in December of 2020, that when we were at a ground surface level of 65% and then 50%, it was clear that the aquifers and subsidence was positively impacted. We can also see from that report when we moved to a 35% surface water that the aquifer and subsidence was started to again be negatively impacted. So I would urge the trustees in the current budget process for fiscal year 22-23 to establish a 50-50 groundwater surface water mix, utilizing this as our option B to help the aquifers and subsidence, and still continue option A of working with GMA and Lone Star to try to get those two organizations to establish reasonable DFCs. And then I would ask the trustee board to look at for fiscal year 23-24 to move to a 65% surface water and a 35% groundwater. So we clearly establish a good upward path of rejuvenation of the aquifers and try to work on more improvement of subsidence. And with that, Mr. President, I thank you for the time. And I would thank all the trustees for their service and all the current board members that are on this call.
Thank you, Walter, and I admire your desire to continue coming to these meetings even when you don't have to.
Well, it's look, this is important stuff, but I appreciate your comments. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments from the public before we proceed forward? All right, going once. Any other public comments? All right. There are no more public comments. Thank you all very much for taking the time. I could tell everyone took a lot of time and energy to organize their comments, and we all really appreciate what everyone had to say. So thank you very much for your participation. Now we move on to item 4 on the agenda. Part of our consent agenda, items 4, 5, and 6. Before we vote on all 4 together, I'll ask if there's any discussion on item 4. Any discussion on item 5? Any discussion on item 6? Okay, very well then. So Brian, just to clarify, do we need to vote, or how do we need to do this consent agenda? Have I been doing it correctly?
This is Brian. Yes, we consider a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda without further discussion.
I'll make a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
I second that motion. This is Bob Lux. I second that motion.
Thank you, guys. All right. So I'll go ahead and call the vote. I, Eric Hurd, vote in favor. Ron Wilson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Cal Mays?
Aye.
Paul Martin?
Aye.
Harvey McIntosh?
Aye.
Ron Cucci?
Aye.
Jan Price?
Aye.
Scott Custer?
Aye.
Laura Norton?
Aye.
Bob Lux?
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move into our regular agenda, item 7. Consider an act on adjustments to utility accounts due to the 2021 winter storm.
That item, excuse me, was placed on the agenda at staff request. Back the week following the storm, I sent out an email regarding calculating the sewer volume, the water average that translates into the maximum sewer volume for our water bills for the next calendar year, and requested that we utilize last year's sewer volume so the sewer calculation wouldn't be impacted by the high water bills that we expected to come in based on the freeze and the leaks. And we did calculate the sewer maximum sewer volume based on last year's number, and I'm recommending that we leave that in place. That number doesn't change very much from year to year, from household to household, and certainly not much at all as an average of a mud district. I think 90% of the rates are somewhere in the 5,000 to 6,000 gallons per month. And I would just request that we keep that in place for this calendar year rather than trying to go back and recalculate in some way a number based on the leaks and the freeze conditions. Now, this is not a trustee decision, but I would just recommending tonight that you think about this and try to have a consensus at the MUD meetings next week. I think it would be difficult for some MUDs to do a calculation one way and then another. So just I'm requesting consistency and allow us to continue with that number on the water bills going forward. And I think the impacts would be negligible on the revenue, and certainly the right thing to do for the customer.
And that's the recommendation you're going to give to the MUDs at our meetings next week? That
is correct, yes.
Okay, it's very good. So there's no action needed tonight?
That is correct, no action. I just wanted to get it on the table for discussion and get any feedback from the trustees if they had a different idea.
This is Trustee Martin. I do have a comment and possibly a question. If you refer to page 16 in the packet, it's part of the San Jacinto River Authority report, and you look at the February water usage. The current year, I kind of interpolated this, but I think it's close. It looks like we consumed 325 million gallons, and last year it was 280 million gallons. So that leaves, and if we revert back to the last year's numbers, that leaves a shortfall of 45 million gallons. And can you tell the trustees how that gets, who pays for that, I guess is the question.
Are you looking at water or wastewater?
I'm looking at water, but doesn't that end up being the same thing?
Well, we're thinking that much of the water from the leaks did not go down the sanitary sewer system. So I think that answers that. It went into the streets and into the storm drains, a large amount of that.
I understand, but someone's still going to have to pay for the 45 million gallons of water.
Well, and this, the waters, that will be my next topic. I wanted to hit the wastewater side first. The next part of my discussion is water adjustments. And we know most of the communities around us are making adjustments for water, broken water pipes. As a matter of fact, the policy that I sent out in the email regarding adjustments to customers' accounts talks specifically about freezes. And I actually remember when that policy was first drafted and talking about it, how it first came about. And the folks that were here many years ago and told me that policy actually came about because of a freeze many years ago with broken pipes and people wanting to get adjustments to their water bills. So we think this making an adjustment to a customer's water bill certainly falls right in line with what this policy was created for. It could be bigger numbers, bigger adjustments in some cases, but again, when we adjust it, the community as a whole, you know, kind of shares in that expense.
You know, with talking about the freeze, I have to say, I made a decision, and as I approached my sink, I said to myself, I know my water bill is going to go up because I'm going to continuously run this so my pipes don't freeze. And I've seen discussion of that on social media too, that is also expected to be free. And I don't know about, I can't go that far. I'm ready to pay more because it was my decision to save my pipes and do what I did. That's all.
And that really wouldn't qualify for an adjustment. The adjustment policy is for sudden and unforeseen events, such as breaks, freezes. Choosing to run your water more wouldn't fall into the category where we would make that adjustment.
Jim, this is Bob Lux. Could you please direct me to where what page of the meeting packet where freezing is specifically?
You know, I'm sorry to report it went out in a memo attachment, but we got our policy numbers mixed up, and it was RNS 14 and we have RNS 12 and 13 in the packet. So it was emailed to you back a few weeks ago, but it's policy RNS 14. And it's actually on page 2 of RNS 14, where it specifically lists freezes as an unforeseen event that can be adjusted.
I appreciate Bob's question because RS 14 is not in our packet. It ends at 13, and I was wondering the same, but I assumed I missed the word freeze, but it's not in there. I didn't think.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Laura.
Bob, I just sent it to you.
Oh, it is, as you recall, I have all of the policies which you printed for me in New York City phone book fashion. Thank you for sending it.
Another, I was anticipating that we would by now be being overwhelmed with calls requesting adjustments. And I wanted to talk about maybe streamlining that process some from the existing policy. But I had a staff meeting with water billing and Maureen and her staff today, and they have informed me that they think they can handle the calls. They're not needing any streamlining, that they're happy to come in on a Saturday and get caught up if needed and deal with the customer in a efficient and reasonable way, but not needing any special authorities delegated to them. The only thing we would that we did think about that might be helpful right now, there's a maximum of $1,000. Any adjustment, leak adjustment that exceeds $1,000 is required to be taken to the board of directors. Mike and I thought maybe for this one single event, we could modify that number to where when we have a customer with a large event that can be well demonstrated with some sort of evidence that it was related to the freeze or a pipe break, that he and I could go ahead and make that adjustment and then report this to the board the following month. That may be helpful rather than having to put it off and wait for the next board meeting. But again, we can be talking about that at the MUD meetings next week. I will tell you the St. Jacinto River Authority has agreed to waive the surface water conversion fee. So if we make an adjustment per the policy, that they will also waive that surface water conversion fee for this event. And that would be absorbed into their budget. So again, it's spreading that burden out between amongst the community for those residents that suffered broken pipes and major incidents at their house. And we think it's probably a gesture of goodwill that is appropriate. And we know other communities are doing that around us. Houston has announced they're going to be adjusting their water bills, and others have as well.
And I suppose if I could interject something, I suppose, the concept of community implies that those with plenty that don't need an adjustment will just pay their bills, and that some that are in need, that need an adjustment, will ask for an adjustment, and then it'll likely be granted because everyone else is paying their bills. So I think that's how it works when things work well. Okay, do we have anything else on item 7?
No
Trustee
action.
McIntosh, I think on the mud agenda items, we want to bring to the attention of mud directors that they should be familiarize themselves with RS 14 dated May 1st, 2019.
Okay.
And this is Kyle Mays. I think regarding this policy for making billing adjustments, some cap on how much, on what the limit should be, whether it's $1,000 or $2,000, some cap makes sense. And just curious, Jim, if you have an amount in mind where you think, you know, up to you'd be comfortable waiving or really giving relief to somebody that had an incident like you referred to.
I would guess that 2,500, you know, would be a workable number for this single event. And in the event we have someone who had a really catastrophic failure and damage to their home, and it was at that level that Mike and I could go ahead and do that. Anything above that, bring it back to the board. And I think that would cover probably a large percent of the incidents that we'll be dealing with.
Chairman Hurd and Jim, and anyone on the call that might have an answer to this. Is it possible that the homeowner would submit this to their property casualty firm prior to our automatically issuing a discount or a rebate or whatever you want to call it, an adjustment? I mean, is this something that is done? It would seem to me that this is a lot different than an irrigation break in the summertime, a pool issue. This would result in property damage to the home, which could be quite substantial.
And you're probably right. I would guess if you've got a water bill that's in that range, that it's going to have done significant damage, and you're probably going to be filing an insurance claim, whether or not they will be reimbursed for the water bill. I hadn't even thought about that concept.
It really calls on us too. I know we've done communication to our customers to take care of your backflow preventer and so on, but this was a unique, getting down to 9 degrees. And there were other ideas out there, like put a bag of mulch over top your valve box. I put a pillow inside mine. Just maybe brainstorm about ideas that we could communicate to residents prior to the freeze to mitigate this risk of this happening again. Thanks.
All right, anything else on item 7? Very good. So you'll take that to the MUDs this week?
Yes.
Very good. Item 8, receive Woodlands Water staff information and consider action on Woodlands Water cash reserve refunding the MUDs.
This is a standard agenda item this time of year where we look at our reserve level, and per a resolution adopted in your packet, that if it exceeds a certain threshold, that we do refunding back to the MUDs. And I think we are proud to report this month that we are looking at a refund to the MUDs.
Well, that's good news. Do we need to take action on that tonight, or are you going to give us specific numbers?
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm trying to find
it. This is Maureen. It's on page 26. The refund amount is $410,000 allocated. The second half of the page shows your individual MUDs allocations based on active and projected connections. That shows how we arrived at that calculation.
Very good. Do you need us to authorize you at the trustee level to do this, or would that be a MUD issue?
No, I think we would request that you, well, approve this refunding, I think is appropriate.
Okay. All right, does anyone want to make a motion to approve the refunding set forth on?
Paul Martin, I'll make the motion.
Second.
Who was that?
I'm a second, Laura Norton.
All right. Okay, I'll go ahead and call a vote. I, Eric Hurd, vote in favor. Ron Wilson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Kyle Mays?
Aye.
Paul Martin?
Aye.
Hartley McIntosh?
Aye.
Lon Cucci?
Aye.
Jan Price?
Aye.
Scott Custer?
Aye.
Laura Norton?
Aye.
Bob Lux?
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, let's see. So we're gonna talk a little about item 9 before we actually move into item 9. So I'm gonna read item 9 and then we'll talk before we consider it. Okay? Item 9, consider and act on, including but not limited to, take from the table the audit committee recommendation for the SJRA to move forward with a feasibility study to expand, upgrade, modernize Plant 2 on Research Forest Drive and phase out Plants 1 and 2. So the reason I said we're going to talk about this is because I recall at a meeting a couple months ago, we had some considerable discussion about the fact that this was tabled, and Hartley, I know Hartley, you'd had a pretty strong opinion about that, and I just want to, do we think we're clear to untable this? Well, to take a vote to untable it and move forward, or does anyone object to us considering this, and if so, why?
It's Director McIntosh, Trustee McIntosh. It's very simple. I make a motion to bring the item off the table by unanimous consent.
Okay, so do you object to us taking it off the table and hearing the item?
I think if nobody opposes, that's unanimous consent.
Okay, I suppose it is.
This is Brian. We do need a second.
This is Director Lux. I second that motion.
All right, so that's a motion to take it off the table. So we've got did I make the motion to take it off the table? Who made the motion to take it off the table?
Mr. McIntosh did.
This is Brian. Trustee McIntosh made the motion by unanimous consent. It was seconded, and if there's no objection, then it passes by unanimous consent. We don't need a roll call vote.
Okay, very good. So we're clear, Brian, to roll forward on this, in your opinion.
Correct. It becomes the immediate pending business once it's taken from the table.
Okay. Thank you all for your patience. So then our audit committee had taken a look at this issue, and I'd like to ask the audit committee if you've got a recommendation on this.
Yes, this is Ron Wilson, and our recommendation is that we go forward with the study. If you all recall, about 6 or 8 years ago, we had a meeting and everybody told us how bad the future was going to be. And in the past few years, we've taken inventory of all our assets. SJRA has reviewed the age and such. They've assigned their probability of failure to it. We know we got a whole bunch of money looking at us in the face, and we ought to do this study because it makes sense to build something. It appears to make sense to build something that's up to date.
All right, so the audit committee is recommending SJRA move forward with the feasibility study. Is that correct?
That's correct. Now, I'll let them speak to the feasibility study. It includes a little bit more than just looking at this one option.
Well, but we've got a committee recommendation, so a second isn't needed. I suppose I should just call a vote.
Well, can there be discussion? I had put some thought into this.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's discuss it.
Okay. Well, I like the idea of a centralized plant because I've reached out to some civil engineer friends these past couple of months, and they report that other municipalities have enjoyed cost savings with larger centralized plants. However, I think we need to look at this from a higher elevation. And I think about a more centralized location that's not near residential. Perhaps we, and I mean the township, could be a part of this conversation, and we could explore lands that they have that could accommodate a large plant. Again, something that's not so close to residential. For me, if I had a bar chart of where I have the most friends, it'd be in Mud 7, and they're wildly against the centralized site being at number 2. I have many accomplished Ironman friends that are very against Lake Woodlands being impacted by potentially 100% of the Woodlands affluent. Plus, it doesn't seem smart to truck so much waste uphill. I know it's not a truck, it's a pipe, but still. Anyway, my hope is for us to start this project on the right foot and not walk into a train wreck on day one. My hope is that we get more input and maybe a larger group than the audit committee. So those were my comments I thought of for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord.
This is Kyle Mays, and I'm on the audit committee. And I will say that the audit committee approached this without biases. You know, we don't necessarily want it to be at plant 2. We don't necessarily want it to be at plant 1, but we want all the information because we're talking about literally hundreds of millions of dollars spent over decades of time. And there's no way it would make sense anytime soon to close plant 2 and go build something completely new somewhere else. The numbers are going to be prohibitively expensive, are going to be very expensive regardless of which way we go. And so there's the idea is to get as much information as possible to help us make a better decision.
I have a question, Kyle, or anyone else on the audit committee that reviewed this. So will our feasibility study that SGRA is moving forward to, will it include any type of community involvement or feedback from township or other community leaders? Is there a component to the feasibility study that's going to address the concerns? I think Mark had some, included an opportunity evaluation. Will there be anything like that included in this feasibility? Or are they just going to go right to analyzing the engineering and the cost of the engineering where they decide to put it? I mean, do we need to develop the scope of the study a little more before we turn them loose, spending $500,000 or $1 million on a study?
There is a provision to have community outreach, but even so, it makes more sense to start with the feasibility, the practicality of, to Laura's point, are we going to pump uphill, to send all the sewage to one location, and so there's just some basic steps you have to get your mind around first before you can even think about, do we want to go buy land, 10 miles away, 20 miles away, and ship it even farther and start from scratch. And so, yes, there is a plan for community outreach, not necessarily right at the beginning.
This evening, I spoke with a township board member, and it's just a quick off the cuff, but they may have some land near I don't know, a George Mitchell Preserve. He was surprised to hear that this was an agenda item. So I'd like to see us do what we can for free right now to just reach out and open the discussion and see what kind of more scope definition and direction that we could move forward with.
So I have another question. You know, we've looked at the needs analysis every year for the past 15 years, and I always fall out of my chair when I hear the numbers of what it's going to take to rehab a water well, or my gosh, the numbers are just astonishing how expensive these projects are to rehab our infrastructure. And I'm sure, you know, it's obviously, you know, we're probably talking $500 million to go for consolidation. These are big, big numbers. So I'm excited that our committee has looked at the issue and is feeling like, hey, we need to roll forward with this and do this feasibility study. I will say I'm a little concerned. We've got some very esteemed members of our community that have taken an opportunity to speak. We have a lot of personal assets in our community. We haven't even let them know we're thinking about doing this, township being one of them. And I think would feel a little better about moving forward, spend $500,000 or $800,000 on a study if I felt like we knew for sure here at the very beginning, SGRA was going to be tapping our other resources here locally and including the community a little more, not just, you know, rolling forward to print out a report and bill us for $500,000. So, and that all that takes is that just takes time to better develop the scope of the feasibility study. And you know, I think it's great. I think it's something we should do. I'm just kind of concerned that maybe we shouldn't develop a little bit more. And I could be wrong. We could have a great plan right now. So I'll just ask the committee about my comments. What's your opinion of the current plan? Is it really going to include the community? Are we really going to, can we really feel good about this, or should we postpone this decision and look at better defining the scope? What do you think?
This is Trustee Martin.
So
I'm also, Trustee Martin. I'm also on the audit committee, and I know that one of the things that the Sunset Committee tasked San Jacinto River Authority with was better communication with the public. And to that end, I would ask perhaps Ron Kelling to make some comments. I know we discussed when it would be appropriate, and I believe Heather Cook may be on the line as well, and she may have some insight into this communication issue. Ron and Heather, or anyone else on San Jacinto, what's the consensus on your end about community involvement, and when would it be appropriate, and what does that do to the scheduling of the project?
This is Ron Kelly. First, let me clarify something. There's no scope written. The only thing we're asked is to go forward with this. We've issued an RFQ for consultant. We haven't even gone through the process of selecting a consultant, much less develop a scope of work and negotiate a contract for this. That's still off into, I think, midsummer. So there's plenty of time to talk about what needs to go into the scope. The second thing is that we do encourage that there be public involvement, community involvement in the process. Whether or not that is, and I think we discussed that with the audit committee, I think the question remains is that part of the scope of work of the consultant that's doing this project? Is it part of, is that something WWA wants to take care of with a consultant, or is that another a separate issue? So anytime you have public involvement, public engagement, it does better identify the project. Now, when you go ask people about questions like, would you be willing to spend an extra $10 a month on your bill to get X? Well, you need to know what that dollar amount is and what they're getting before you can go ask that question. So there probably needs to be a little bit of work done before you get involved, but during this process, it would be helped gratefully if there would be some kind of public involvement, public engagement, community engagement process. And there's still plenty of time to add that to this consultant or separately, however y'all would like to do it.
Ron, this is Bob Lux. I'm a little confused as to the process. I don't understand how a request for qualifications can be solicited when there is no scope of work. There's until you.
Well, what I mean, we don't have a detailed scope of work of what they're going to. The consultants know this is about a general feasibility study about wastewater treatment plant consolidation. They know that part of the scope. Now, we haven't worked out, you need to work X hundreds of hours on this task and X hundreds of hours of this task, and you know the fee is going to be blank. That's what I meant by we don't have a detailed scope of work. We have a general concept of what the work is going to be, but not a detailed scope of work. So there's plenty of time.
Okay. Thank you. But I don't know, maybe I still don't get the full concept, but it seems like, but this is, I'm sure, the normal process, but it seems like the cart's ahead of the horse. Because I don't know what we're going to get. You know, it could be very vague what comes back.
Well, one of the things that and let me help with the process thing. This is just to direct us to move forward, which would be going through the process of finding who does this, who's qualified to do this. Before we even enter into a contract, we would bring back to this group, or however y'all want to handle it, the detailed scope of work, professional services contract, the dollar amount that is involved, and who would do the work and the specific items in the scope of work. That would be, I believe, Chris, in the June to July timeframe.
Right.
So you still
Thank
have.
You, Ron. That was an excellent reply.
You still have another, I'll call it bite at the apple before we even spend $1 on this.
Good. Thank you.
I think going to the township, perhaps with just the seed, the idea might be like you've done Chris Meeks, maybe it was last month, did the big presentation to us, and maybe doing something like that to let them know that it's being thought of. And I can see maybe you don't want to, but I really like Trustee Martin's point about the open communications. This is going to be a big project. I know it may not be met with open arms, but that's on us to push it forward if this is a real good cost-saving measure that we can take on. So that's all I wanted to throw in. Thanks.
So this is Eric. You know, in the next several years, we're going to be spending tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, maybe not hundreds, plural, maybe 100 million on rehab and fixing up our infrastructure. And I guess that's why maybe we want to take a look at a feasibility on what it would look like to, you know, put in some new facilities instead of fixing up our older facilities. Then we can apply that $100 million to, you know, our new stuff and not spend it keeping the old stuff running. But then also we have to acknowledge that even once if we have a brand new poopy plant, it's still processing poopy. And, you know, no, I mean, it is funny, but what if we spend $500 million and then it still smells, right? I don't think there's any guarantees that we're gonna end up in you know, where some people hope that we'll be. I don't know that it's realistic. I think maybe the feasibility will help better sculpt our expectations. I don't know, but for sure, we're going to be spending a lot of money fixing up our old facilities in the next few years. So before we do that, if we have an opportunity, a lot of people are, you know, have a desire to take a look at this. Maybe we should. I think I think our concerns about community involvement and communication with our local leaders is maybe the most important issue right now, early on, that we need to make sure we're including in this feasibility. And it sounds like, Ron, you guys have that as part of your plan, right?
Yes, sir. May I make a suggestion, President Hurt?
Yeah.
Maybe the next trustee meeting, we could come and present to you what our thought process would be for a community engagement plan. What that would involve, who that would involve, when it would happen, that sort of stuff. Would that?
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
I think, especially for the folks that are most concerned about that issue, I think that would go a long way towards to getting a unanimous agreement on this. Because I'd really like, if we're going to start something like this, I'd like for us all to agree on it and how we're doing it.
This is Scott Custer speaking. I walked away from our discussion last month. Pleased that we had the opportunity to ask so many questions, but B, I left under the assumption that we would get more refinement under the options. I think we identified a number of assumptions that may have either been incorrect or not fully represented in the options. And what I think I also hear in Trustee Norton's comments and others, that we could use some increased granularity around what you've called option 3, consultant recommendation or other options, putting some more thought and feeling around what those might be ahead of any authorization to spend. So updating the options as discussed and identifying any others. And last, because Mr. Unlin and the public, his commentary is probably not unique when there may be a presumption that we can get to a straw man for thousands of dollars versus $500,000 to $1 million. And I'm not saying that $500,000 to $1 million isn't the right number. I'm not saying it is. So having some justification as to why that is the right number to analyze 3 options for us to give an initial green light on to go further, i.e. is there a pre-feasibility study or something else? Having some very firm guidance from you to really feel good about our vote would help me anyway.
Thank you, Scott. All right, good discussion. And Ron, I really think that's a great idea. Any other discussion on this issue? It's a very important issue for our community, and I'd like for us to be unanimous. If we're going to do something, I want us all to feel good about it.
This is Mike Mooney. Lance, would it be helpful if you explained what a feasibility study encompasses? It's not a design, maybe just go through what a feasibility study the detail that you give.
This is Scott Custer. You mean next time, or do you mean tonight?
We lost you, Mike. Trustee McIntosh, I think we've had considerable discussion on this, and I move the previous question, and that takes a second and a 2/3 majority to pass.
What was it? I didn't understand what you were saying, Hartley.
I move the previous question. That takes a second and a 2/3 to pass.
Are we still open for discussion as well?
Yeah, we could still discuss.
It's closing the discussion. I moved the previous question.
Yeah, we're not going to close the discussion, Hartley.
Well, I made the motion. Does it have a second or failed for lack of second?
This is Ron Wilson, I'll second.
Ron Wilson, you second to close discussion?
Correct.
All right. I guess
that's a separate motion. Takes 2/3 to call the question.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have my Robert's rules. You're getting pretty fancy on us here, Hartley. I think what we need to do is defer this until the next meeting for a final vote.
Well, I think you got a motion and you got a second. People want to vote whether to let San Jacinto River Authority budget $500,000 to $1 million and go forward with a study where we'll have plenty of time to ask questions. And they're going to give us a presentation before they let any contract. They've already said that.
So Ron, you and Hartley would like to push a vote on this tonight. Is that what you're saying?
That's what they're saying.
Yeah, we kind of
all right.
got everybody's opinion on this.
I oppose moving forward. Ron,
that. By the way, that motion is not debatable. All right, the motion to call a question is not debatable.
Ron, how do you vote?
Aye.
Kyle?
Aye.
Paul?
Aye.
Hartley?
Aye.
Ron Cucci?
Aye.
Jan Price?
No.
Scott Custer?
No.
Laura Norton?
No.
Bob Lux?
No.
All right. So where we end up?
That's a tie?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 no's. So I think it passes.
It fails.
Right.
Yep.
It fails. The motion fails, and you can continue discussion.
Thank you, Hartley. Really appreciate it. All right. Do you have any more discussion on this?
Yes, I do, Eric. I just wanted to say, in response to Ron's suggestion for SGRA to put together some public engagement suggestions.
Who is this?
I'm sorry,
I'm sorry, this is Heather Cook with.
Oh, yes. Okay. Thank you, Heather.
I apologize. It would be helpful to have a suggestion or guidance from the trustees as to the scope of public engagement. And public engagement can look very different. It can look like talking to stakeholders, community leaders, or it can look like full scale engaging the community in workshops, in in polling and focus groups. And if those are the items you would like for us to put together and propose, put a small presentation together for next time to say, this is the entire scope, this is what it can look like. To give the trustees a better idea of what we're talking about when we say public engagement, that's fine. If you want us to have something more specific, a recommendation from the trustees would be appreciated.
Well, I think, and I appreciate that, Heather. Thank you. I think that's helpful. And Ron, your comments are helpful. And I don't want to take away from what I think is some great progress this evening. It's really sad that we're forced to vote like that, because I think that we'll be at a unanimous point. I think ultimately we're going to move forward with something, but we just need to develop the scope a little better, right?
Yeah, I really appreciated the discussion this evening. It's very good.
So I would propose that we roll this to the agenda. As a president, I'm going to add it to the agenda the next meeting to consider and act on approving the feasibility study. At that meeting, it'd be great, Ron, you and Heather, if you could be there and give us a presentation on the scope and how you're going to include the community and potentially. I really like Mark's comments about opportunity evaluation. I know that's the whole thing in and of itself. I don't know if that's appropriate for a feasibility study, but I don't know. Let's put some thought to it and see if we can have a better feel for how the community is going to be involved. So if we spend $500,000, we can feel good that we're spending the money wisely as good stewards.
We'd be happy to do so.
Okay, great. All right. So then we're going to move on. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, President Hurd. That was great.
Okay. Item 10 on the agenda, consider use of SGRA Woodlands Division fiscal year 20 excess funds.
This is Chris Meeks. In your packet on pages 28 to 40 is the proposed usage of the FY20 excess funds that are in the Woodlands Division. This was presented to the audit committee, I believe, last week as well. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
This is Trustee Martin. Chris, could you please explain to the board what you're asking for? Maybe you could start with page 31, those numerous calculations, and the excess funds of $1,283,000, and then the two components, the FY19 component and the FY20, and state what you're asking for.
Certainly can. So, as Trustee Martin was talking about, on page 31 shows the excess funds calculation, and basically it's based on the resolution, excuse me, that creates the R&R fund. And going through that process, you'll see it equates to just about 1.3 million in excess funds from FY20. However, that is slightly misleading. It is excess funds. However, roughly half of those funds were left over from FY19. Basically, this time last year, the trustees approved those funds to be used for the South Shore Gravity Main project. And they were put into the O&M budget, but on my behalf, they were not put into the FY20 budget. So those funds still remain, and they just rolled over from 19 excess to 20 excess. So that 1.3 million, roughly 650,000 of it is from FY19. The other half is from FY20. What we're proposing by the resolution, the excess funds can do one of two things. They can be refunded to the MUDs, or they can be transferred to the Woodlands Division R&R fund. So what we're recommending with this packet is for the funds to be transferred to the R&R fund to pay for the South Shore Gravity Main that was approved originally in FY19, the 10-man that was unbudgeted, as well as looking forward ahead, some items in there, some water model updates, some water system CIP projects, excavators, then just general rehab of the system in general terms.
All right, so this isn't something that you need us to vote on?
This is something we do need the trustees to vote on.
Make a motion to keep it with SJRA.
So I have to just interject this. I don't see, Brian, are you there?
This is Brian, yes.
Take a look at our item 10 on the agenda and let me know if we're authorized to vote on this.
This is Brian. I do not see an action. I mean, I see consider, but I don't see act.
Yep.
So would that be because this would be actually voted on at the MUD level?
This is Brian. No, this is a budget decision, so it's voted on by the trustees.
Okay, well, let's roll this one to the next month as well. Can we do that?
This is Brian, yes.
Okay. All right.
This is Trustee Martin, excuse me.
Yep. Go ahead, Trustee Martin.
Brian, can we authorize rolling this forward within SJRA and then confirm, or I don't know if I'm using the proper word, but confirm our discussion on this
ratify.
Or vote on this? Ratify.
This is Brian. Yes, you could do that. Actions that are taken that are not specifically action items on the agenda are voidable but not void, and you have to have an item on next month's agenda. So at the end of this meeting, we would need to, when we talk about items for future agendas, we'd have to request an item to ratify that action.
I just don't want to hold up San Jacinto's budgetary process, which is very extensive, and for them not to have the knowledge that this is going to be rolled forward will perhaps, cause them losing steps and time. That's all I'm trying to avoid.
Well, I don't have a problem submitting a vote that has to be ratified next month. We don't want to do that too often because it really does complicate things. But I think your point is valid. Do you want to make a motion that we approve subject to ratification?
Well, I want to defer to the chair, Eric, but if San Jacinto River Authority is okay with the fact that they can go forward with their processes, knowing full well that this will be voted on at the next meeting, and the audit committee's recommendation is to roll it forward.
Okay, Chris, are you good with rolling it forward?
Yes, sir. I am fine with that ratification next month, and knowing that it's not 100% certain.
I'll second Trustee Martin's motion to roll it forward.
Okay. So just to be clear, because I'm very unclear.
Could I help?
What is it I'm rolling it forward is going to mean we're just going to consider this again next month. If we're going to make a motion to approve subject to ratification, I think we need to say, yes, we approve San Jacinto River Authority's proposed use of the excess funds, right? And then we'll vote on that. And then next month we'll have to ratify it.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Yes, the second choice. We really kind of need to, as Paul Martin said, we really kind of need to know the general direction that y'all want to go so that we can prepare our budget. And then if y'all want to ratify that action next month, knowing that, that would be fine, but we do need to move forward with our budgeting process.
Okay, so, all right, just procedure here. We've got a motion and a second pending. Does anyone want to vote on the motion and the second to roll it forward and not consider it tonight?
This is Brian. Just to clarify, when we were earlier talking about motion to roll it forward, is that to roll forward the funds to SJRA or to not consider? That's what I thought.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Paul,
rolling forward the funds into the next fiscal year, not rolling forward the issue to the next meeting.
Paul, can you just clarify your motion that you made?
Okay, so I just wanted to not lose any ground here, time-wise. So the proposal that I made would be to approve the request that San Jacinto River Authority has made for the two components of the 1.3 million to be moved forward for the fiscal year 19 and the fiscal year 20, and then let's ratify it at the next meeting. And I think everyone should be okay with that.
To remain in SJRA's budget.
One point of, Scott Custer, point of clarification, please. If I vote for this, am I subsequently approving the recommended use of the funds starting on page 34?
Chris, do you want to speak to that, please?
Yes, sir. This is Chris Meeks, and yes, that is the intent, to put the money into the R&R budget and then identify the usage of those funds are identified on those pages you discussed.
Thank you for that clarification. Laura, would you like to repeat your second?
Yes, I sure.
Okay, so we have a first, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to call the vote. I, Eric Hurd, vote in favor. Ron Wilson, how do you vote?
Aye.
Kyle Mays, how do you vote?
Aye.
Paul Martin, how do you vote?
Aye.
Hartley McIntosh, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ron Cucci, how do you vote?
Aye.
Jan Price, how do you vote?
Aye.
Scott Custer, how do you vote?
Nay.
Laura Norton, how do you vote?
Aye.
Bob Lux, how do you vote?
Aye.
All right. Motion carries. And I want to thank everybody for your patience. It is very challenging discussing complex issues over Zoom meeting. It's a lot easier in person. And so we've got to make sure the record's clear. And so thank you, everybody. All right. So that was item number 10. We're going to move on to item number 11. And then we will need, of course, Brian, to replace item 10 on next month's agenda for ratification. Copy?
This is Brian. Yes, we'll make sure that's on for item 21 to carry that forward to next month's agenda.
Item 10. Item 10.
Right, but item 21 is where we discuss items for placement on future agendas.
Oh, yeah, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Item number 11, receive presentation of SGRA Woodlands Division 10-year project plan, fiscal year 2022 to 2031. Chris?
Yeah, actually, Aaron's going to handle this today. Hello, sir. So let me try to share my screen here. If y'all can see it. Can y'all see my screen?
No.
Okay, let me try this again. Let's see, share. Okay, now let's try it.
Looks good.
Can y'all see it? Okay, good. All right, so once again, the 10-year project plan, as was kind of discussed earlier, on your Google Drive, you should have received a copy of the 10-year project plan. It's got an executive summary on the front. We have the hard copies, but virtual, we do it electronically this year. The executive summary explains in a snapshot the projects and the funding for those projects. One thing you'll note when you go through the project plan, there are summary sheets. We did a little differently this year where we combined all the R&R projects into 2 summary sheets. The first one is shown as a cash flow summary sheet where you can see how the funds are allocated each year for those projects and then what the balance would be for the R&R fund. The second sheet represents what you would see on the individual project sheets, which are the summary of contracts let for those projects in that particular fiscal year. That's for the R&R, and then later on you have a few projects that are in the packet for the 2-hour peak flow projects. Those are capacity projects, the bond funded projects, and then the capacity funded projects. As usual, and of course, thank you, Director Hurd, for the compliments earlier in the meeting about the freeze and our infrastructure. But as noted, the project plan, we look at the aging infrastructure. We use our asset management strategy to evaluate each of those components or each of those assets. And then we formulate projects based on level of service goals and objectives while keeping in mind our budgetary constraints. And asset management, in a nutshell, does all these things, very preventative in nature instead of reactive, where preventative in the long run usually costs a lot less than being reactive and have failures and having to scramble to fix things. So just a recap on the Woodlands, we have 5,000 wastewater assets, or over 5,000 wastewater assets, and over 3,000 water assets. And each year we reevaluate these assets based upon that strategy we've talked about before for our asset management plan with our consequence of failure, likelihood of failure, and mitigation for each asset. So from that, the projects that were compiled over that 10-year period, and like I mentioned before, it's it's noted around $189 million for the 10-year period. Of that, roughly 37,000 linear feet of gravity sewers being rehabbed, 102,000 linear feet of these old AC water lines being replaced, rehabilitation, but not lowering, just to keep in service, 8 water wells, rehabilitation of elevated storage tanks, so 4 of them, and the replacement and rehabilitation of wastewater treatment plant components. And one thing to note, of course, long discussion on consolidation, approximately $78 million of projects are in that project plan for some later years that are dependent on how we move forward with that consolidation. So just keep that in mind. So then in a nutshell, The total projects, as noted, $109 million, kind of just summarizing the first 3 years individually and then the remaining years as a total. One thing what was requested is that we show why 22 is so much higher than the others. And that is because there are some bond and capacity funded projects of higher dollar amounts in addition to the R&R fund projects in that fiscal year. Following that fiscal year, we currently do not have any additional bond or capacity funded projects. And just to kind of reiterate the I&I reduction strategy from the STAR program. So there are the projects that were identified from the STAR program, primarily gravity main rehabilitation, which we did previously consolidate into our project plan. And now those first of those projects is underway in design. So we are in that phase of implementing I&I reduction efforts. And of course, in conjunction with us on our system, that information was then also being utilized by Woodlands Water and their initiative to identify I&I and the retail system. So short and sweet, but I will take any questions that y'all may have. Take a look at this. If you have any questions on the project plan itself, you can talk to staff. They'll let us know and we'll get an answer.
Aaron, this is Trustee Lux. I have one simple question.
Yes, sir.
Perhaps it's premature. Would these bonds be available through Texas Development Board SWIFT Fund, or would the current market conditions, as Mr. Brown related earlier, be as attractive as one is going to obtain?
I don't think we have the answer for that yet. Currently, the ones that are being budgeted in the project plan are from Texas Water Development Board. However, for anything that we choose in the future to possibly bond fund, I don't believe that's been identified.
Long story short, then, it would probably be conventional bonding, or you just don't know yet?
I don't know yet. Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for your hard work. We appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, let's move on to item 12. Discuss setting standards so if the board approves a project with preliminary costs and a schedule estimate, and then the costs or schedule change meaningfully, the topic will be re-presented. All right, so I think this issue came up when we were discussing the proposal for the 10-man evaluation or 10-man engineering, and the price went up quite a lot. So it's a real issue. It's one we've seen recently. And so we're going to discuss it. Jim, Brian, do you have suggestions so that we can not be surprised again in the future, or have an opportunity to re-review a proposal if the project costs exceed a certain percentage of what we originally approved?
Yes. If I put a note in your packet on, I think I show it's on page 49, following related to this agenda item. And I did visit with the San Jacinto River Authority and our staff, and John Yours had provided some information based on his experience. And I will say this is not a reoccurring issue. It did come up with the 10-man. So I think it's appropriate to discuss putting something in place, but I didn't do a detailed research, deep dive into what's an industry standard, but I did, based on my discussions with staff and others, recommend that for projects that have a defined scope of work, the standard for representing would be if the cost or schedule changed by more than 20%. And then for projects that are very preliminary in nature and have no defined scope, the standard would be representing to the trustees if the cost or the schedule were to change by more than 50%. So I think this is a reasonable protocol to set in place. I don't know that it requires any creating a policy, a standard policy, but I think I would recommend that it just be our staff operating protocol for the Woodlands Water Trustees going forward.
Brian, does that sound like a good recommendation?
This is Brian. Yes, I mean, I think as Jim said, it's going to be tough to have a one size fits all. Those percentage numbers in general terms seems appropriate. And if there's something, if there's a particular project and the trustees want a tighter rein on it, then you could always modify that kind of baseline internal procedure for a particular project.
Maybe it should have a dollar amount too, 20% of a small number versus a dollar
amount with a percentage wise with a dollar amount cap. Maybe it's 100,000 or whatever the appropriate dollar amount is.
And this is Scott Custer. I'm a simple guy. I just like a simple number. I mean, if we could just say 20%, regardless, that's easy. The 2050 thing is a little too hard for me to remember. I'd love for there just to be a number. And the comment I would make here is obviously we all know that this doesn't allow for the budget to increase. It's just if the cost estimate toward the project and something otherwise allocated is significantly changed, we hear about it, right?
What is Jim and Brian, what do you think about just a 20%, or would there be a different percentage that you could just have it be across the board that would be workable?
I'm okay with just keeping it 20%. Again, I don't see this as a reoccurring issue. I think any project that comes before this board, if you want to set different parameters, you have the right to do this. This would just be protocol. It wouldn't be anything other than that.
And this is Scott. The reason I like it is it does that very thing. It just puts it in the brain to say, oh, something changed, better bring it to the appropriate board. And just as a matter of protocol and policy, I feel really good about that, from my vantage point.
Chairman Hurd, this is Bob Lux. I agree, and I think it's very important if we're to continue down the road toward centralization of the wastewater facility. If we send out a proposal that is deemed to be very preliminary and it comes in outrageously high, we better have a way to address it. But I think this is a good place to begin our process.
And I would just recommend if we're going to pick one number for all projects, maybe consider 30%.
This is Brian, and since some, a number of these larger ticket projects are going to be river authorities projects, Ron and Chris, do y'all have input on this as well?
We're fine with whatever y'all decide to do. How's that for a cop out?
So this is Kyle Mays. I agree with Jim. I like the 30% number if we're just going to pick one, because you do run the risk of delaying projects by a month or whatever, to have the board vote. So I would go with a slightly bigger number if we're just going to pick one.
I think for a general policy or just a general operating procedure, I really like Scott's suggestion of just having the one number. I also think that makes sense. I can understand why our staff would like a little more flexibility to bump that up to 30%. And then of course, if we, on a specific approval, really want to keep a tight leash on it, maybe that's a wrong analogy, but try to keep it closer to what we approve. We can always say, hey, no change orders over 10% on that specific approval. But then just having the background, we know that we're never going to get hit with more than a 30% difference. And that'll allow our people to get the work done. Scott, you had proposed the 2020. What do you think about the 30-30? You good with that?
I would support that.
Okay.
Chairman Hurd, this is Bob Lux. How about a second option on that? How about 20 for defined scope and 35 for preliminary, very preliminary?
Well, I think we were just hoping to use one number.
Okay.
And I agree. It's just, I'm not going to remember the 25-35. Just if we just did a 30%, I'll probably remember that, but I don't mind that too.
We're not the ones that have to remember it, though.
Yeah.
Well, if it's not a policy, we are going to have to remember it. Yes.
Brian, so how do we document this, Brian? What do we need to do?
This is Brian. I think if it's an internal procedure, that's something that Jim would probably have as just an internal staff document that they would maintain, but would not become part of our formal policy manual.
Okay, well, I'll give instructions to Jim here in a moment. Are we good with the 30-30, or does anyone want to discuss this some more? Okay, well then, Jim, I'm going to instruct you for your general operating to have 30% be your allowable, up to 30% be your allowable change for both projects with a defined scope and for projects that are very preliminary in nature on a go forward. Good?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we'll make a note of that in your handbook. All right, thank you all. Let's move on to item 13, receive information from SGRA staff regarding review of groundwater surface water delivery ratio for fiscal year 2020. And of course, this is what Arthur, I think, was commenting on earlier. So who's going to handle this? Is that you, Ron?
Yeah, Jim, do you want to talk about the policy first, and then let me go to the numbers?
Yeah, let me just make an introductory comment that many of you may remember back in May of 2020, after a number of meetings with the Groundwater Surface Water Ad Hoc Committee, there was a recommendation put forth with 4 points. Those are included in your packet. One of those points was to review the groundwater surface water delivery ratio on an annual basis during the budget process, with the goal to move from our current 65-35, 65 groundwater, 35 surface water ratio to a 50-50 blend when possible. So in keeping with this document that was approved by the trustees, Ron's going to present some information. They're beginning their budget review process for the SJRA and the GRP. So he's going to present some data for you to consider, and I don't think we're not asking for any action tonight, but just let him present the data that's been preliminarily put together.
And I'll put this in a summary. And Jim, we're going to talk about this at the MUD meetings too, right?
Yes.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll just summarize. On page 51 of your packet is one piece of paper that kind of gives the calculations, and I'll get to the punchline. Basically, if for the average Woodlands residential customer that uses 10,000 gallons per month, they would pay approximately an extra $2.30 per month to move the Woodlands from a 35% blend to a 50% blend. And that's using fiscal year 21 rates, because we obviously haven't developed the 22 budget yet. What we would need to do to implement this, we would have to, on the GRP side, create a new rate for people who are receiving surface water who want to receive more than their allocated amount. Then that rate would be what they would pay. And my sheet that I've given you gives you the calculations. And maybe in the interest of time, next week in the MUD meetings, if y'all have specific questions, we can go over that in detail. But that's the bottom line to it is, and it's approximately $2.30 a month per month every month for every resident to go from 35% surface water to 50% surface water.
Okay.
This is Bob Lux. Did I understand you correctly in that the individual customers could opt out if they care not to?
No.
Okay.
This would happen. This would have to be a Woodlands total.
Okay.
Not be like 3 MUDs decide to do it or 2 MUDs. It needs to be the entire Woodlands MUDs decide to do it or not.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes.
I appreciate the efforts of Bretta Hoff and yours. I know that you've done some work on this and getting us to a more surface water equation. This isn't the time to discuss it, but it's related. And that is, I'd like to see us communicate with residents more about why it is we want to go to more surface water and use it as a way to engage the public in what's going on with our groundwater debate right now. I think that could be an opening for us to say, well, our rates are going up. We have evidence that aggressive groundwater pumping leads to subsidence. So that's all I wanted to say on that.
I guess we could do a press release or something to kind of get things rolling. And Heather, you might be able to come up with something, right?
Yes.
Something to think about, you know.
Good, very good. All right, anything else on this item? Let's move forward then. Item 14, receive update on GMA 14 Joint Planning Committee. Another important topic.
I guess that's me. The next meeting is in 21 days, 3 weeks, March the 31st, where we anticipate that the GMA 14 will vote on a desired future condition to move forward. And I know that will not end the issue. But that's all I have to report on that for right now.
Jim, did you have anything? No? Okay. Let's move on to item 15, receive the attorney's report.
This is Brian. A few items under the attorney's report this evening. One, as I'm sure all of you know, the governor did lift his mask and business restriction mandates effective today. There were some questions about whether that action impacted at all the disaster proclamation that suspended the in-person meeting requirements of the Open Meetings Act. We have been in contact with the governor's office and confirmed last week that his actions that became effective today do not have any impact on his disaster proclamation that suspends in-person meeting requirements. So we are still status quo in our remote meeting environment at this time. Second, we are working, I think we reported last month, on some proposed changes to our form of construction 10 development agreement. Not a whole lot of districts still out there that have active development or upcoming active development, but we have dusted that off and made not really any major changes, but updated some references to current statutes and whatnot. So we're hoping to have that for next week's meetings for the boards to review and consider. Lastly, as you may know, and this is sort of an attorney item, sort of a GM report item, there is a contractor, a boring contractor installing new fiber optic cables throughout the Woodlands right now, and they are wreaking havoc on our water lines. They are busting lines throughout the Woodlands. It's becoming a significant issue for staff to go and repair those. They have not been very cooperative in our efforts to minimize those issues, my understanding, and so we are going to be working with outside litigation counsel on that matter here very shortly. Jim, is there anything you want to add on that issue?
I would just give you a statistic. We've had since January 1 about 100 incidents, what I would call either a broken mud water main or a busted broken service line to a customer. We submitted an invoice to TACUS about a week ago for about $60,000 in repairs. I asked for a sit-down meeting with them. We did sit down at that meeting to try to work out maybe a revised business plan or business construction strategy on their part. They informed me that we have about 40 contractors in the Woodlands now. Their plan is over the next month or so to bring in 100 plus. So that business plan will bring us to our knees. And they did inform us that according to the permit they have through Montgomery County and the Texas Utility Commission, that they're not responsible for the damage. We have to go collect it from the 40 plus contractors doing work around the Woodlands. So that's a challenge for us, almost an impossibility. So as Brian mentioned, we will be looking at what options we may have to deal with this challenge. It's not anything that I've ever dealt with in the past. It's quite difficult.
Can we get an injunction to make them stop? Possible?
This is Brian. I don't think, yeah, we don't want to get too much into litigation discussion and open session, but we will be talking about a number of different possible legal remedies.
There have sure been a lot of complaints in the public. So I thank you guys for looking into this. It's ugly out there. I didn't know how ugly those numbers that we're going to more than double the amount of contractors. And so what I've observed so far is nothing. Wow, that's sad. Thanks.
All right, anything else, Brian?
That's it. That's all I have.
Okay, I know you've been busy, and we thank you for your work for us, Brian. We really appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, item 16, I received the general manager's report. Jim?
Thank you, sir. A few items. In your mud packets next week, we will have an announcement from the Montgomery Central Appraisal District. It's election time for them again. We'll see if any of our MUDs are interested in putting forth a candidate as a special district candidate. So just a heads up on that. We did have a meeting with the San Jacinto River Authority dam site people, the dam people, and they are looking at doing some investigative work at actually the Bear Branch Dam. You may recall the Bear Branch Dam is managed by the Lake Conroe Dam Division. And Mike, you want to give a few comments on that meeting we had with those guys?
Yeah, this is Mike Mooney. The Bear Branch Reservoir, the River Authority has lowered the reservoir levels, water level, to do some inspections there. There is believed to be some voids in the dam itself, so they're going to be doing some ground penetrating radar to determine the depth of the voids, the extent of the voids, and then from that analysis, they'll determine a scope of work, repair or inject those voids to reestablish the structural integrity of the dam. Excuse me. Those MUDs that participate in the dam, I think there's 5 of the MUDs, 46, 47, 67, 60 maybe. Just trying to give you a heads up that your budget will be budgeting for the repairs to that dam here in the near future. That's something that we'll probably be budgeting for the 2021, 2020.
Okay.
Answer any questions if I can.
Thank you, Mike. Jim, do you have anything more to report?
I do. We had a request at last month's board meeting for the directors to start meeting again in person. And I just would offer that I think that we need, as long as the waivers in place by the governor where we can meet by Zoom, that we shouldn't do a mixture of some MUDs meeting in person and some by Zoom. I'd like to wait until we can get a consensus from all of our MUD directors that they'd like to resume meeting in person. And I don't think we have that yet. In your packet, there are a number of public notices regarding the San Jacinto River Authority budget process and their rates. This is part of the enhanced outreach that the River Authority is doing in conjunction with Woodlands Water Agency and our MUDs to better inform the public of how their rates are set, how their budgets are set. Mike and I did have the initial kickoff today with the consultant to look at the America's Water Infrastructure Act for creating a risk and resiliency plan. I think we presented this a month or so ago as an agenda item that we would be working on this topic, and we just had the kickoff meeting today, so we'll be giving more information about that. Also, the Montgomery Central Appraisal District issued a press release today that the disaster exemption is available for those homes and businesses that had major damage during the freeze. So we'll be looking for folks that may be applying for that exemption. Also, we had a request from Scott Custer to do a tour of the SCADA system of the San Jacinto River Authority, and they're happy to offer that, Scott. I don't know if I've had a chance to tell you, but we're going to be presenting that at the MUDs to see if more folks, more directors may want to participate in that tour. Bob Lux did attend the Texas Water Conservation Association meeting. I think it was March the 3rd through the 5th. Bob has sent me a number of documents that I haven't had a chance to fully go through, but I think the takeaway, if we'll be presenting more information in the future. Texas Water Conservation Association takes an active role at looking at legislation that's being put forward that might affect water entities. I think they're following, if I remember, 3 or 4 bills primarily this year, but we'll be keeping in touch with that and giving you more information in that arena as we get it. Also, the Lone Star Groundwater District had requested a meeting with several of our elected officials, kind of an informal meeting with several of their elected officials. I did review that with President Hurd. We've narrowed that down to some trustees and some directors. So we'll be looking at setting that meeting up in the next couple of weeks to sit down and see if we've got any common ground between officials. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Jim.
Question, do those trustees and MUD directors know who they are that
Yes,
they're being
sir.
considered? Okay.
Yes, they do. It's Trustee Bob Lux, Director Neil Gaynor, Trustee Hurd, and Director John Yours, and myself.
I'm in there too. And there's been a little, another discussion and I might be there, right?
Yes, you could be.
I didn't get a chance to speak with you before the meeting.
Okay. Yeah, we had with President Hurd, we had narrowed it down. We were only going to have four attend, and we had 5 that we thought were good candidates. So it was a challenge, and so more to come.
Yeah, we'll make sure that everybody that wants to be there can try to be there. You know, we're really fortunate to have the opportunity to even meet with them, that they'll even give us the time of day, frankly. But we'll get it figured out, because we've got some great resources on our board and with the directors. So we'll talk more with Jim about all this. Okay. All right. Any other questions for Jim? Item 17, receive update on Regional Subsidence and Groundwater Research Consortium and Science Advisory Committee engagement with HART.
I've got a monthly report that I will have in the mud packets for you to see next week.
Okay, thank you, Jim. All right, item 18. Let's see, and I think maybe this is where we can answer Gary Miller's question earlier about the pole behind his house. Steve, staff update on matters pertaining to implementation of automated metering infrastructure program.
Yeah, in your packet is just a status update, a summary. This is not the full analysis. This thing is getting drawn out primarily because of the freeze and some other tasks that have overwhelmed us. But I'm still looking at actually relocating the poles. That will be something I hope to have available for next month, and then maybe an action item at the next month's agenda on this.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Jim. Item 19.
Excuse me, Director or Trustee Martin, a question. Are all the poles, Jim, are all the poles currently installed?
All but one. The one planned for Terramont Park has not been installed.
Okay. Do you foresee that being a problem of this magnitude that we're just discussing?
I've discussed it in detail with the township. It meets the threshold for distance to where, public notification was not a requirement for any of these.
Right.
Now that we have residents that are concerned, that's an issue that we're dealing with and want to address their concerns. The pole at Terramont Park far exceeds any public notification requirement. According to our field reports, it far exceeds any site distance that might be an issue with any homeowner. So I don't expect that to be a concern.
All right, thank you.
All right, any other questions for Jim? Okay, Jim, I want to thank you for your hard work. I know you've been one busy guy the past month, and you've got to be tired. So we really do appreciate you putting up with us. And we're just grateful to have you at the helm. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, item number 19, receive staff update on SGRA application for additional funding and engineering on Spring Creek and a separate application for drainage improvements to Bear Branch and Research Forest Drive.
Ron, anything to add on the Spring Creek application? I think if I remember, that project did get approved. We're reviewing the interlocal agreement between our MUDs and the San Jacinto River Authority, so it's progressing well.
And it's anticipated that those ILAs will come before the MUDs either next month or the following month.
Very good. And regarding the Bear Branch Research Forest Drainage Improvement Concept, we have had a number of meetings with the Texas Water Development Board staff, a special meeting with MUD 67. It was on their agenda last month. So that application is still moving forward. I have had preliminary discussions with Montgomery County about partnering with us on this. I don't have a firm response yet, but I hope to get that fairly soon.
All right, very good. Item 20, discuss and consider ideas for improving Woodlands water operational efficiency.
You know, believe it or not, we do have quite an extensive list that Maureen has put together that she's been working on over the last several months that we had hoped maybe to present to you this month, but other matters just caused us to pause on that. But very soon, she's got some really, really great accomplishments to share with you guys. And I will tell you that we have been working very hard this week doing training on our new AMI system. We had the in-house training with Amoresco and their consultants, and we're getting reads from the towers on the meters. So it's quite exciting here.
That's cool.
Been a long time coming. All right, very good. Thank you, Jim. All right, item 21, our last item, discuss any matters for placement on future agenda.
The ratification on the SJRA funds.
That's our current item 10 on the agenda. It will be ratifying use of SJRA Woodlands Division fiscal year 20 excess proceeds. And then
we'll have another item on the feasibility study for Ron to give some more detail on the possible scope and public outreach.
On the agenda will be receive information and consider an act. If we want to, we can consider an act after we get the information. So we'll have that in there as well. All right, I don't think we have anything else.
I do, excuse me.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Jan.
I just have a suggestion. I don't know if it really needs to be an agenda item or not, but for consideration and discussion, I noticed that over the last 4 or 5 months, our meetings have grown significantly longer. It occurs to me that maybe we should consider beginning our meeting at 5 o'clock rather than 6 o'clock or even earlier. A couple of things stand out, and frankly, I have not discussed it with anybody, so I don't know if anybody agrees with me or not. But number one, it would presumably be more efficient for the use of the staff's time to begin at 5 o'clock. They wouldn't have to kill that hour in between 5 and 6 at the end of their workday. Number two, it's a weekend, or it's a weekday evening, a school night, and some trustees may have families and children that maybe they'd like to have dinner with at a more reasonable hour than now it's 8:15.
I appreciate those comments. I agree with you. Very good.
Yeah, my wife got cold tacos for me in the kitchen. And then my son is in there. They're wondering why my meeting's taking so long. So I think,
here.
Jan, how early can we start the meetings? Is 5 good? Do we want to start at 4?
Whatever. I would just leave it up to Jim and his staff to talk about and maybe come up with a suggestion, determine whether it's even worthwhile to do. But
does anybody have an objection to meeting at 5, starting to meet at 5?
Yes, I would love to keep the current time, but I'm clearly alone in that. My job and situation would really create a hardship for me personally, but that would be my point of view.
So I'm doing it Jim, to consider the request, and you can make a recommendation for us at the next meeting. Talk with Brian about it and see how that works. Because I see Ron, he's still at his office. Jim, it looks like you're at your office. And Kyle, I don't know where you are, but that's beautiful. Looks like maybe Hawaii.
Yeah, the sun's still out.
Yeah. So Jan, thank you. That was a very good suggestion. All right. Anything else, or shall I proceed to adjourn the meeting?
I'll second that.
Meeting's adjourned. Have a good night.
All right. See y'all tomorrow. See y'all next week.
We need some tacos.
Bye, everybody.
Good to see y'all. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Hey, thank you, Eric.
Good night.